now we're going to find out what happened to Hansel and Gretel. So we know they came to a house. The roof was made of cake, the walls was made of bread, and the windows were made of sugar. So the poor children were so hungry they didn't think of knocking at the door and asking permission. Hansel broke off the roof, Gretel knocked through a window. They sat down where they were and they started to eat the house. After a good few mouthfuls, they heard a voice from inside. "Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who's that nibbling at my house?" The children answered, "The wind so wild, the heavenly child." And they went on eating because they were so ravenous. Hansel liked the taste of the roof so much that he pulled off a piece as long as his arm. Gretel carefully pushed out another window pane and started crunching her way through it. Suddenly the door opened and an old woman came hobbling out. Hansel and Gretel were so surprised that they stopped eating and stared at her with their mouths full. But the old woman shook her head and said, "Don't be frightened, my little dears. Who brought you here? Just come inside, my little darlings. Come and rest your poor selves in my little box of treats. It's as safe as houses." She pinched their cheeks fondly and took each of them by the hand and led them into the cottage. And as if she'd known that they were coming, there was a table laid with 2 places, and she served them a delicious meal of milk and pancakes with sugar and spices and apple and nuts. After that she showed them into a little bedroom where there were 2 beds made up ready with snow-white sheets. Hansel and Gretel went to bed, thinking they were in heaven, and fell asleep at once. But the old woman had only pretended to be friendly. In fact, she was a wicked witch, and she had built her delicious house in order to lure children to her. Once she captured a child, whether a boy or girl. She killed them, cooked them, and ate them. It was a feast day for her when that happened. Like other witches, she had red eyes and couldn't see very far, but she had a keen sense of smell, and she knew at once when humans were nearby. Once Hansel and Gretel were tucked up in bed, she laughed and bobbed her knobbly hands together. "I got 'em now," she cackled. "They won't get away from me." Early next morning she got up and went to their room and looked at the 2 of them lying there asleep. She couldn't keep her hands from their full red cheeks. Nice mouthfuls, she thought. She then seized Hansel, and before he could utter a cry, she dragged him out of the cottage and into a little shed, where she shut him in a cage. He cried then all right, but there was no one to hear. Then the witch shook Gretel awake, saying, "Get up, you lump! Go and fetch some water from the well and cook something for your brother. He's in the shed. I want him fattened up. When he's fat enough, I'm going to eat him." Gretel began to cry, but it was no good. She had to do everything the witch ordered. Hansel was given delicious food every day, while she had to live on crayfish shells. Every morning the witch limped down to the shed, leaning on a stick, and said to Hansel, "Boy, stick your finger out. I want to see if you're fat yet." But Hansel was too clever for her, so he stuck a little bone through the bars, and the witch, peering through her red eyes, thought it was his finger, and she couldn't understand why he wasn't fat. 4 weeks went by, and she thought Hansel was still thin. But then she thought of his nice red cheeks, and she shouted, "Gretel, hey girl, go and fetch lots of water. Fill the pot and set it on to boil. Fat or thin, skinny or plump, I'm going to slaughter that brother of yours tomorrow and boil him up for stew. Poor Gretel, she wept and she wept, but she had to fetch the water as the witch ordered. Please, God help us, she sobbed. If only the wolves had eaten us in the forest, at least we would have died together. Stop your snivelling, said the witch. It won't do you any good. In the morning, Gretel had to light a fire under the oven. We'll do the baking first, said the witch. I've kneaded the dough already. Is that fire hot enough yet? She dragged Gretel to the oven door. Flames were spitting and flaring under the iron floor. Climb in and see if it's hot enough, said the witch. Go in you go. Of course, the witch intended to shut the door when Gretel was inside and cook her as well. But Gretel saw what she was up to and said, I don't quite understand. You want me to get inside? How can I do that? Stupid goose, said the witch. Get out of the way. I'll show you it's easy enough. She bent down and put her head inside the oven. As soon as she did, Gretel shoved her so hard she overbalanced and fell in. Gretel closed the door at once, secured it with an iron bar. Horrible shrieks and screams and howls came from the oven, but Gretel closed her ears and ran outside, and the witch burned to death. Gretel ran straight to the shed and cried, Hansel, we're safe, the old witch is dead. Hansel leapt out, as joyful as a bird that finds its cage open. They were so happy they threw their arms around each other's necks. They hugged, they jumped for joy, they kissed each other's cheeks. There was nothing to fear anymore. So they ran into the cottage and looked around. In every corner there were trunks and chests full of precious stones. These are better than pebbles, said Hansel, dropping some in his pocket. I'll take some too, said Gretel, and fold her apron with them. And now let's go, said Hansel. Let's leave these witchy ones behind. After walking a few hours, they came to a lake. It's going to be difficult to get across, said Hansel. I can't find a bridge anywhere. There aren't any boats either, but look, there's a white duck. I'll ask if she can help get us across. Little duckling, little duck, be kind enough to bring us luck. The water's deep and cold and wide, and we must reach the other side. The little duck swam up to them, and Hansel climbed on her back. Come on, Gretel, climb with me. No, said Gretel, that will be too much of a cargo. We should go one at a time. So the good little bird took them one after the other, and when they were safely ashore again, they walked further and further, and the forest began to grow more familiar. At last they saw their own home in a distance. They ran up and rushed inside and threw themselves into their father's arms. The man had not had one happy moment since he left his children in the forest. Not long after that, his wife had died, and he was all alone and poorer than ever. But now Gretel unfolded her little apron and shook out all the jewels, so they bounced and scattered all over the room, and Hansel threw handful after handful of them. So all their troubles were over, and they lived happily ever after. The mouse has run, my tale is done, and if you catch it, you can make yourself a great big furry hat.